Hey friends, back with another Connecting Jesus to the Old Testament. This is part 2a, Connecting Jesus to the Past, where we're looking at the genealogies in Matthew chapter 1. So, you might be thinking, oh gosh, genealogies. This is why some people skip Matthew chapter 1, but that is a mistake. And this video is to explain why. One of the coolest things I ever did was go through the genealogy of my family just to see where do they come from, what countries, the different surnames that were part of the people that made me. And digging into that is really, really cool. You discover some amazing stories in the history. It's not about, being like superior to anybody else, but it's just to see where did your family come from and the people in your family tree. So that's what Matthew starts off his gospel by doing, is he begins to list the names of the people that make up Jesus's family tree. The question is why? Why does Matthew do this? Why does Matthew take the time to list the people that were the ancestors of Jesus? Well, Matthew chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, it says, "The record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." Why does Matthew point these two names out specifically, Matthew and David? Because he is demonstrating that Jesus was the rightful heir to the throne of Israel, both racially through Abraham and royally through David. If Matthew cannot prove that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, then putting our faith in Jesus would always leave this really big question mark. Was he really the Messiah? Could it really be proven? And it certainly wouldn't be anything worth being martyred for, which happened to all of the disciples except for John. Matthew chapter 1 verse 2, it says, "Abraham fathered Isaac, Isaac fathered Jacob, Jacob fathered Judah and his brothers." Now, let's look at the names, because the four men that are mentioned here are not walking around with halos around them. We think of Abraham as this super righteous guy, left the polytheistic culture that he was a part of to believe in one God, monotheism, and that God, that he didn't have the law, he didn't have the Torah, he didn't have the Ten Commandments, that was all after him, but he was doing the right thing, and so God credited his righteous behavior and his good deeds as righteousness, as belief and faith in God. So, but the first recorded words of Abraham in the Bible, you would think, it's like this is, God's way and we're going to do this. No, the first recorded words of Abraham in the Bible are when Abraham told his wife Sarah to tell the people, because they were going into a foreign country. It was like a famine, and there were two times he did it, in Genesis 12 and then in Genesis 20. Two times he did it, and both times as they're going into this foreign nation, he tells Sarah, his wife, to tell them, "You're my sister." Well, that's a half-truth, because Abraham and Sarah had the same father but different mothers. So Abraham and Sarah were half-brother, half-sister, and they were married. And so, yes, it is a half-truth, but they're also husband and wife. But Abraham was afraid for his own life, because apparently, even though Sarah was a 65-plus-year-old woman, she was incredibly beautiful. He was afraid that the men in that culture would kill him to get his wife. And so he told her, the first recorded words of Abraham, "Tell them you're my sister." So this is Abraham. So, and Abraham has got a few other issues. Abraham and Sarah can't conceive. And so Sarah says, "Take Hagar, my servant, and be a husband to her, sleep with her." And so she does conceive and bears Ishmael. And so, Abraham is 0 for 2 really, as far as like righteousness is concerned, and the moral high ground. And then, of course, God says, "Take your son Isaac," when Isaac is finally born, "Take your son Isaac and sacrifice him on the altar." And And it's not that that was not a good thing. He was being obedient to the Lord. The Lord obviously was going to stop him. Abraham didn't know that at the time. He was just going to be obedient. And the way it kind of worded is that Abraham believed that God would restore Isaac. If he killed Isaac, if Abraham killed Isaac, that God would restore Isaac back to him, because he said, "We will come back to you," when he's talking to the servants at the bottom of the mountain. So, Abraham is not, as I said, not walking around with a halo around his head all the time. This is one of the people that is the ancestor of Jesus. So now you've got Isaac, the son of Abraham. And once Isaac told a government leader that Rebekah, his wife, was his sister. That's Genesis 26. That's even less true than it was with Abraham and Sarah. I think Abraham and Isaac were like second cousins. Isaac and Rebekah, Isaac's wife Rebekah was like his second cousin or something like that. So it was even less true. And then Isaac is seen, the word there is fondling. He's caressing his wife, Rebekah, and he's seen, but he had told them, "She's my sister." So really weird stuff. Then you've got Jacob, all right? Jacob has essentially 4 wives. He's got 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. He only wanted one, Rachel, but his father-in-law tricked him, and so he married Leah first, accidentally. He wasn't aware, and then he married Rachel. And when there was contention between Leah and Rachel as far as having children, his wives gave him their maidservants, and for him to be their husband. And so he was sleeping with 4 different women, essentially married to all 4 of them. And so he has 13 children with 4 wives. That's Genesis 29 through really 35. You're kind of getting the whole story of this whole thing. And God calls himself repeatedly the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These men were imperfect. They were not perfect men. We think about the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we think, oh, they were so holy. Read the stories. They were frail, faulty, fearful men, and yet God repeatedly chose to associate himself with them, and they become ancestors to Jesus Christ.